I'm Jessica, 29, and I never thought I'd be responsible for my sister Amber's complete downfall. When she stole my $25,000 non-refundable deposit for my dream wedding venue and used it for her own wedding, I was devastated. The smug look on her face when she told me still haunts me. What Amber didn't realize was that by stealing my wedding venue, she'd handed me the perfect opportunity to unravel her carefully constructed life of lies. Before I dive into this family drama that changed everything, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you've ever had a family member betray your trust, hit that like button. Family revenge stories like mine remind us that karma always collects its debts, so subscribe if you want to see more tales of justice served. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up in a well-maintained colonial house in the suburbs of Boston, Amber and I were always portrayed as the perfect sisters. On the surface, our upper-middle-class family appeared picture-perfect. Dad Lawrence was a successful accountant, Mom Catherine taught at the local high school, and my sister and I were always well-dressed and polite in public. But behind closed doors, a much different dynamic was at play. From the moment I could form memories, Amber, who is 3 years older, established a pattern of taking my things. It started innocently enough. She'd borrow my toys without asking and return them broken, or she'd read my diary entries to her friends for entertainment. These might seem like typical sibling conflicts, but what made our situation unique was our parents' response. Instead of correcting Amber's behavior, they enabled it. "Jessica, you need to learn to share with your sister," my mom would say, completely ignoring the fact that sharing implied consent, which I never gave. "She's older and needs these things more than you do right now," my dad would add, reinforcing the hierarchy that would define our relationship well into adulthood. Our childhood home had 4 bedrooms, but when I turned 13, Amber suddenly decided she wanted my room because it had better light for her makeup vanity. Instead of telling her no, my parents moved me to the smaller bedroom near the noisy laundry room. When I complained, my mother simply said, "Your sister is going through a difficult phase, Jessica. Please try to be understanding." I remember crying myself to sleep that night, wondering what made Amber so special. This pattern continued throughout high school. When I made the cheerleading squad, Amber suddenly became interested in cheerleading too, despite having called it stupid the year before. Not only did she join, but my parents spent a fortune on private coaching to ensure she became captain. When I won a writing contest, Amber complained until my parents helped her submit a late entry that mysteriously received an honorable mention. Despite this underlying tension, we maintained the appearance of closeness. We posted sisterly photos on social media, went on shopping trips together, and to outsiders, we seemed inseparable. The truth was far more complicated. I both loved and resented my sister, a conflicting emotional state that I carried into adulthood. After college, I pursued law school while Amber bounced between marketing jobs, never quite finding her footing but always landing on her feet thanks to our parents' connections. I met Ryan during my second year at a Boston law firm where we both worked. He was intelligent, kind, and most importantly, he saw through Amber's charm offensive immediately. "Your sister seems to watch you very carefully," he observed after our third date when Amber had coincidentally shown up at the same restaurant. "It's almost like she's studying you." I had never thought about it that way, but Ryan was right. Amber didn't just want my things. She wanted my life, or at least the parts she perceived as better than hers. When Ryan and I became serious, Amber's behavior shifted noticeably. Suddenly, she needed a relationship too. Marcus entered our lives at my parents' anniversary party 6 months after I started dating Ryan. Tall, impeccably dressed, and dripping with confidence, he introduced himself as a financial investor who had recently moved back to Boston after making his fortune in New York. My parents were immediately impressed by his stories of celebrity clients and luxury properties. Amber, seeing their approval, attached herself to him immediately. Their relationship progressed at warp speed. While Ryan and I built our connection thoughtfully over shared values and genuine compatibility, Amber and Marcus seemed to be in a race. When Ryan proposed to me after 2 years with a modest but meaningful diamond ring that we had chosen together, Amber announced her engagement to Marcus just 3 weeks later. Her ring was ostentatious, a diamond so large it looked almost comical on her slender hand. Marcus believes that the size of the diamond reflects the size of his love, she told me, her eyes challenging me to disagree. Behind her, my mother beamed with pride. Ryan and I began planning our wedding for the following September. We wanted something elegant but meaningful, and the search for the perfect venue became my passion project. After visiting 8 different locations, I found Hawthorne Estate, a historic mansion with breathtaking gardens and a grand ballroom that perfectly suited our vision. The estate only hosted 12 weddings per year, and they had exactly one Saturday available during our preferred month. "We need to act fast," the venue coordinator, Diane, told me. "This date will be gone by tomorrow if you don't secure it." The deposit was steep, $25,000 non-refundable, but after consulting with Ryan, we decided it was worth it. I withdrew the money from my personal savings, money I had been setting aside since my first job at 16, and handed over the check with trembling hands. Diane assured me I had made the right choice. "Your wedding will be absolutely magical here," she promised, handing me a folder with the contract and receipt. I can already envision it. When I shared the news with my family, everyone seemed genuinely happy for us. Even Amber offered congratulations and asked to see photos of the venue. My parents suggested a celebratory dinner, and for once, I felt like my milestone was being properly acknowledged. If only I had noticed the calculating look in Amber's eyes as she flipped through the venue brochure, perhaps I could have prevented what happened next. "September at Hawthorne will be perfect for you," she said, handing back the brochure. "I'm thinking about a winter wedding myself. Something different." I believed her. That was my first mistake. 2 months after securing Hawthorne Estate, I was at work reviewing contracts when my phone buzzed with a text from Diane, the venue coordinator. "Just confirming the date change paperwork came through okay? So excited for June 15th instead of September. The garden roses will be stunning then." I stared at my phone in confusion. I hadn't changed any dates. Ryan and I had specifically chosen September because it worked best with our work schedules and gave us adequate time to plan. I immediately called Diane. "There must be some mistake," I said when she answered. "I never requested a date change." There was an uncomfortable pause before Diane responded. "I'm looking at the paperwork right now, Jessica. It was submitted last week by Amber Wilson. She had the authorization code from the original contract and said she was handling the arrangements while you were busy with work. She mentioned you were siblings, so I assumed." My blood ran cold. "What exactly did she change?" "Well, everything," Diane admitted, sounding increasingly uncomfortable. "The date is now June 15th, and the reservation name has been changed to Amber Wilson and Marcus Blackwood. She provided an email authorizing the transfer with your signature. Did you not approve this?" I could barely breathe.
"No."
I absolutely did not. After a difficult conversation where Diane explained that legally, since Amber had the authorization codes and what appeared to be my signed approval, the change was binding. The $25,000 non-refundable deposit had been transferred to Amber's event, and if I wanted my original September date, I would need to pay another full deposit, assuming the date was still available, which, as Diane regretfully informed me, it was not. Someone else had booked it within hours of Amber releasing it. I sat in my office, hands shaking with rage and disbelief. Ryan found me there an hour later, still staring blankly at my computer screen. "She stole our venue," I said when he asked what was wrong. "Amber somehow got the authorization codes and transferred everything to her name. She's getting married at Hawthorne in June." That evening, my parents had invited both couples for dinner. I hadn't told them what happened, wanting to confront Amber face to face. When Ryan and I arrived, Amber and Marcus were already there, champagne glasses in hand. "We have exciting news," my mother gushed as soon as we entered. "Amber and Marcus have moved up their wedding date. They found the most perfect venue." I looked directly at Amber. "Hawthorne Estate? For June 15th. A satisfied smile spread across her face.
"Yes."
"Isn't it amazing?" I know you had looked at it too, but when they called saying they had a cancellation for June, I just couldn't pass it up. It's the perfect season for the gardens. They didn't call you, I said, my voice shaking. You stole my reservation. You transferred my deposit. The room fell silent. My father cleared his throat uncomfortably while my mother's smile faltered. Marcus looked genuinely confused, glancing between Amber and me. Don't be so dramatic, Jessica, Amber finally said with a dismissive wave. I did you a favor. September is hurricane season anyway, and it's not like you can't find another venue. You forged my signature, I said. You committed fraud. Ryan put his hand on my arm, silently supporting me while keeping me from saying something we might regret. My father finally spoke. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Amber, did you really take Jessica's reservation? Amber's expression hardened slightly before she manufactured tears. I didn't think she'd mind. Marcus's investors are only in town in June, and this venue means so much to me. Jessica has always been the sensible one. I thought she'd understand. To my horror, my mother moved to comfort Amber. Of course she understands. Don't you, Jessica? Your sister really loves this venue, and you can find another one. There are plenty of beautiful places around Boston. She stole $25,000 from me, I said, disbelieving what I was hearing. My life savings that I used as a deposit. Well, my father interjected, if the money is the issue, perhaps we can help with that. Though I'm sure Amber would have covered it eventually. Amber sniffled dramatically. Of course I would have. Once Marcus's next investment round closes. Which reminds me, Dad, did you get a chance to look at those papers I sent you? Marcus is offering family a special opportunity to invest. And just like that, the conversation shifted away from her theft to Marcus's supposed investment opportunity. Ryan and I sat through the most uncomfortable dinner of my life, watching as my sister not only got away with stealing my wedding venue but also managed to convince my parents to consider investing in her fiancé's business. The next day, Ryan suggested we speak with a lawyer about the venue situation. She forged your signature, Jess. That's criminal. We can fight this. But after consulting with a colleague who specialized in contract law, we discovered Amber had been clever. The authorization had come from my actual email account. She must have accessed it somehow, and the digital signature matched mine perfectly. Without proof of her breaking into my accounts, it would be difficult to prove fraud. The venue was acting in good faith, and their contract protected them from exactly this type of dispute. Despite the painful betrayal, Ryan and I agreed to attend Amber and Marcus's engagement party the following weekend. Partly to keep peace with my family, but also because I was still struggling to understand how my sister could do this to me. The party was held at their newly purchased luxury condo in downtown Boston, a stunning two-story penthouse with panoramic views of the harbor. How can they afford this place? Ryan whispered as we took in the Italian marble countertops and custom furnishings. I thought you said Amber was between jobs again. She is, I confirmed. It must be all Marcus's money. As the evening progressed, I found myself alone on the balcony, needing a moment away from Amber's gloating and my parents' fawning. The sliding glass door was partially open, and I could hear Marcus and Amber speaking in hushed tones in his home office adjacent to the balcony. The Wilson family connection is perfect, Marcus was saying. Your father's reputation in the accounting world gives us immediate credibility. Once he invests, his colleagues will follow. He's reviewing the prospectus now, Amber replied. I told him we're offering 20% returns minimum. Marcus laughed softly. Nobody questions returns like that when they think they're getting insider access. Your parents will bring in at least 5 more investors, each with minimum $250,000 contributions. That should keep us going until after the wedding. And cover the venue deposit I had to transfer, Amber added. Jessica was so angry. Forget her, Marcus dismissed. By the time we're done, your family will see which sister made the better choice. Just make sure your father signs those papers this week. The Belgrade property deal won't wait. I retreated from the balcony, my mind racing. Something about their conversation set off alarm bells. 20% guaranteed returns? Rushing my father to invest? Properties in Belgrade? It all seemed too good to be true, and in my line of work, that usually meant it was. The conversation I overheard at Amber and Marcus's engagement party continued to trouble me. As an attorney with experience in corporate law, I knew that guaranteed returns of 20% were, at best, highly suspicious and, at worst, indicative of fraud. My concern wasn't just about Amber stealing my wedding venue anymore. I worried my parents could be getting pulled into something dangerous. When I returned to work on Monday, I decided to use my firm's legal database access to research Marcus Blackwood and his investment company, Blackwood Capital Partners. What I found, or rather, what I didn't find, was disturbing. Marcus claimed to have an MBA from Wharton and a track record of successful real estate investments in New York, but there was no Marcus Blackwood listed in any Wharton alumni database. His company was registered in Delaware only 14 months ago, with minimal public information available. The address listed for his New York office turned out to be a virtual office service that provided mail forwarding and occasional meeting rooms. This doesn't look right, I murmured to myself, printing out the documents I'd found. Ryan, who worked on the same floor, stopped by my office during lunch. "What are you working on?" he asked, noticing the stack of papers on my desk. I hesitated before answering. Despite everything, Amber was still my sister. "I'm looking into Marcus's business. Something feels off." Ryan sat down across from me. After what Amber did with the venue, I wouldn't be surprised if her fiancé is just as dishonest. I showed him what I'd found so far. Ryan, who had a background in financial law, immediately identified additional red flags. His company's SEC filings show assets under management of $50 million, but there's no verification. And look at these investment properties he claims to own. Ryan pointed to a list. 3 of these Belgrade developments don't even exist. I worked on a case involving Serbian real estate last year. Over the next 2 weeks, I dug deeper. Using my professional contacts, I discovered Marcus had previously operated under a different name, Mark Blackwell, in Florida, where he had been investigated for running an investment scheme but had left the state before charges were filed. His pattern was consistent: target wealthy individuals through personal connections, promise exclusive investment opportunities with unusually high returns, use new investor money to pay early investors, and maintain a lavish lifestyle to create the appearance of success. It was the textbook definition of a Ponzi scheme. My stomach churned as I realized what this meant. Marcus wasn't just a fraudster. He was using Amber to access my parents' retirement savings and their professional network. And Amber, whether knowingly or not, was helping him. I faced an impossible choice: expose Marcus and potentially implicate my sister, or stay silent while my parents and their friends lost their life savings. Ryan urged me to report what I'd found. "This isn't just about you and Amber anymore," he said gently. "Think about all the other people who will be hurt if you do nothing." "But what if Amber is involved?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if she knows exactly what he's doing?" Ryan took my hand. "Then she's made her choice, Jess. Just like she made her choice about our wedding venue." I spent 3 days weighing my options, hardly sleeping as I considered the consequences of each path. During this time, Amber called to ask if I would be her maid of honor. "I know you were upset about the venue thing," she said casually, as if she'd borrowed a sweater, without asking, rather than stolen $25,000 and my dream wedding location. "But we're sisters. No one else could be my maid of honor but you." Her audacity reignited my anger. "After what you did, you expect me to stand beside you at MY venue?" "Oh, Jessica," she sighed, always so dramatic. "It's just a building. And technically, it's mine now." Mom and Dad think you're being childish about this whole situation. Did you tell them you forged my signature? That you stole my deposit? I prefer to think of it as reallocating resources to where they'll make the biggest impact. Marcus says my wedding will be featured in Boston Magazine. Yours would have just been ordinary. After that conversation, I decided to make one last attempt to confirm my suspicions before taking action. I created a fake email account and contacted several real estate developers in Belgrade, inquiring about partnerships with Blackwood Capital Partners. The responses confirmed my worst fears. None had ever heard of the company or the developments Marcus claimed to be funding. That night, I submitted an anonymous tip to the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, through their whistleblower program, providing the evidence I had gathered about Marcus's fraudulent scheme. I didn't mention Amber's potential involvement, telling myself she might truly be unaware of what her fiancé was doing. 3 days later, I received a call from an FBI agent named Natalie Cortez. "We received your tip about Marcus Blackwood," she said without preamble when I answered. "We've actually been investigating him for several months, but the information you provided gives us connections we were missing." My heart raced. Several months? So you already knew he was running a Ponzi scheme? We suspected, but couldn't prove the connection between his current operation and his previous schemes in Florida and Arizona. Your documentation of the Belgrade properties and the investment solicitation materials you provided were extremely helpful. I swallowed hard. What happens now? We continue building our case, Agent Cortez explained. These investigations take time to ensure we have everything properly documented before making arrests. In the meantime, I need to ask you to maintain absolute confidentiality about this conversation. Of course, I agreed. But my parents are considering investing with him. Is there anything I can do to warn them without compromising your investigation? Unfortunately, no, she said firmly. Any unusual behavior could tip off Blackwood that we're onto him. However, I can tell you we're moving as quickly as possible, and we believe we'll be ready to act within the next few weeks. After the call, I felt simultaneously relieved and terrified. The authorities were already investigating, which validated my concerns, but I couldn't warn my family without risking the entire case. All I could do was wait and try to act normal, including agreeing to be Amber's maid of honor. The following Sunday, my parents invited us all for brunch. Amber spent the entire meal discussing wedding details, showing photos of expensive flower arrangements and custom invitations. "By the way, Jessica," my mother said as she cleared the plates, "we were thinking you and Ryan might want to contribute to the wedding expenses, since you're saving money now that you need to find a smaller venue for your wedding." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me?" "Well, Amber and Marcus are going all out for their special day," my father chimed in. "The budget has gotten a bit stretched, and as maid of honor, it would be a nice gesture." I looked at Amber, who smiled innocently. "I thought the 20% returns on Dad's investment would more than cover your wedding costs," I said pointedly. A flicker of something alarm? Guilt crossed Amber's face before she composed herself. "Marcus's investments are separate from our wedding, obviously, though he has generously offered to help Mom and Dad boost their retirement fund." Later, as Ryan and I were leaving, he pulled me aside in the driveway. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, looking uncomfortable. "At your parents' anniversary party last month, when you were helping your mom in the kitchen," Amber cornered me in the hallway. My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "She'd had a few drinks and started saying things about how you and I weren't right for each other, that I deserved someone more exciting." He looked away, clearly embarrassed. "Then she tried to kiss me. I pushed her away immediately, but she laughed it off like it was a joke. I felt like I'd been punched. Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I didn't want to cause more problems between you two, and honestly, I thought it was just Amber being drunk and inappropriate. But after everything that's happened with the venue, I'm wondering if there's more to it." That night, I discovered through mutual friends that Amber had been telling people Ryan was planning to leave me, that our relationship was on the rocks. It was one thing to steal my wedding venue, but trying to undermine my relationship and spread lies about my fiancé crossed a line I hadn't imagined even Amber would cross. Any lingering guilt I felt about reporting Marcus disappeared. Whatever happened next, Amber and Marcus had brought it upon themselves. In the weeks following my conversation with FBI Agent Cortez, I maintained the facade of a begrudgingly supportive sister. I attended Amber's cake tasting, nodded through her endless monologues about table settings, and even suffered through a bridesmaid dress fitting for a gown she deliberately selected to be unflattering on me. "Lavender isn't really your color," she mused as I stood on the pedestal in the bridal salon, the poorly cut dress, making me look sallow and boxy. But it works so beautifully with my theme. Behind the scenes, I continued gathering evidence. Using my legal expertise, I carefully documented every questionable aspect of Marcus's business that I could find without raising suspicions. I discovered he had opened and closed 7 different investment companies in the past decade, each following the same pattern of promised high returns followed by mysterious business failures. I compiled records showing how his current company, Blackwood Capital Partners, was structured identically to his previous fraudulent operations. One afternoon, Agent Cortez called with an update. "We've linked Blackwood to accounts in the Cayman Islands where he's been funneling investor funds," she informed me. "But we're still working on connecting all the dots for the strongest possible case." "My parents signed investment papers last week," I told her, my voice tight with worry. "They're planning to transfer a significant portion of their retirement savings to him after their CD matures next month." There was a pause on the line. "We're doing everything we can to move quickly, Ms. Wilson. The documentation you've provided has been invaluable. Is my sister implicated?" I finally asked the question that had been haunting me. Agent Cortez's voice became carefully neutral. "We investigate the evidence wherever it leads us. If your sister has knowledge of or participation in financial fraud, that will be determined as the case progresses." That wasn't the reassurance I'd hoped for, but it was the honest answer I expected. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wedding invitation that had arrived that morning. Thick cream cardstock with gold foil lettering announced Amber and Marcus's wedding at Hawthorne Estate, my venue, purchased with my deposit, just 3 weeks away. Ryan found me there, the invitation crumpled in my hand. "You okay?" he asked, sitting beside me. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to stop this whole thing before my parents lose their savings, but another part of me feels like Amber deserves whatever is coming to her." "What kind of person does that make me?" Ryan took my hand. "It makes you human. Amber betrayed you in one of the worst ways a sister could, and it's natural to want justice. But you're also trying to protect your parents and other innocent people from being defrauded. Your motives aren't purely revenge." His words comforted me, but I still felt the weight of what was to come. By reporting Marcus, I had set in motion events that would likely destroy my sister's wedding and possibly lead to her arrest if she was knowingly involved in his scheme. The thought made me physically ill, yet I couldn't see any other ethical choice. As if sensing my internal struggle, Ryan added, "Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel good, Jess. That doesn't mean it's not right." That evening, my mother called to discuss Amber's bridal shower, which I was expected to host as maid of honor. The conversation quickly turned to complaints about my apparent lack of enthusiasm. "Your sister is making every effort to include you in her special day despite your attitude about the venue situation," she chided. "The least you could do is show some genuine happiness for her." I bit my tongue, knowing it was pointless to argue. But then my mother added something that caught me off guard. "Amber mentioned that things between you and Ryan seem strained lately. If you're having relationship problems, honey, it's better to address them now before your wedding." Though Amber thinks, and I have to say I agree, that perhaps Ryan isn't the right match for you. He's always been so predictable. The realization that Amber was actively trying to sabotage my relationship with Ryan to my own mother made something inside me snap. Not only had she stolen my venue and my deposit, but she was now attempting to poison my parents against the man I loved. "Ryan and I are perfectly happy," I said coldly. "Amber has no idea what she's talking about." "Well, she said she saw him having lunch with that pretty paralegal from your firm. Apparently, they looked quite cozy." Another lie. Ryan had been working through lunch all week on a major case. "Mom, please stop," I said firmly. "Amber is lying to you. Ryan would never cheat on me, and I'm tired of her spreading rumors about us." "Jessica." My mother sounded genuinely shocked. "Your sister would never intentionally hurt you. If she mentioned seeing Ryan with someone, I'm sure she was just concerned." After that conversation, any remaining guilt I felt about what might happen to Amber evaporated. She wasn't just a bystander in Marcus's schemes, she was actively manipulative and vindictive in her own right. The next day, I received another call from Agent Cortez. "We've accelerated our timeline," she informed me. "Based on new information, we believe Blackwood is preparing to transfer a large sum of money offshore following his wedding. We'll be moving to make arrests within the next 10 days. My heart pounded. The wedding is in 2 weeks. "I can't give you the exact date we'll be taking action," she said carefully, "but I would advise you to be prepared for developments that may coincide with wedding-related events." The implication was clear. The FBI might make arrests during or around the time of Amber and Marcus's wedding. The timing seemed almost poetic. The venue she had stolen from me could become the scene of her greatest humiliation. As the maid of honor, I was expected to help Amber prepare on her wedding day. Walking into that role knowing what might happen filled me with conflicting emotions. I wasn't a vengeful person by nature, but after everything Amber had done, the theft, the lies, the attempts to undermine my relationship, I couldn't bring myself to warn her. If you've ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted, especially family, you know how deeply it cuts. And when that betrayal is calculated and remorseless, sometimes the only closure comes from seeing justice served. I was approaching that moment now, and despite everything, a part of me still wondered if I was doing the right thing. But then I remembered all the times Amber had taken from me without consequence, and I knew this time would be different. The morning of Amber's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect June day that seemed to mock the storm I knew was brewing. I arrived at Hawthorne Estate at 8 a.m., carrying my lavender bridesmaid dress and a makeup bag. The historic mansion looked even more beautiful than when I had first toured it. Gardens in full bloom, the grand facade freshly painted, and staff bustling about setting up for what should have been my special day. Amber was already in the bridal suite, surrounded by the 3 other bridesmaids, all friends from her college days who clearly knew nothing about how she had acquired this venue. "Finally," she said when I entered, barely looking up from her phone. "I need you to check on the flower delivery. The roses should be blush pink, not regular pink. And tell Mom to stop bothering the caterers. No greeting, no thank you, just demands." Typical Amber. I dutifully went to check on the flowers, which were, of course, the exact shade Amber had specified. As I was confirming the delivery, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Operation proceeding as planned. Agents in position by 2 p.m. NC, Agent Cortez." The FBI would be here during the ceremony, which was scheduled for 3 o'clock. My hands trembled slightly as I returned to the bridal suite. The next few hours were a blur of hairstyling, makeup application, and managing Amber's increasingly demanding behavior. My mother fluttered around her favorite daughter, adjusting her veil and exclaiming over how beautiful she looked, while barely acknowledging my presence. "Jessica, you need more blush," my mother critiqued as I finished my makeup. "You look washed out in that dress." "The dress Amber chose," I reminded her quietly. My mother frowned. "Don't start with that attitude today. This is your sister's special day, and I expect you to be supportive no matter what issues you've had in the past." I swallowed my retort and applied more blush. Amber caught my eye in the mirror and smirked, clearly enjoying the dynamic. As the hours ticked by and we approached the ceremony time, I found myself growing increasingly anxious. What exactly would happen when the FBI arrived? Would they wait until after the vows, or interrupt the ceremony itself? Would Amber be arrested alongside Marcus, or merely questioned? Despite everything, the thought of my sister in handcuffs made my stomach churn. At 2:30, we lined up for the processional. Through the windows, I could see guests being seated in the garden where the ceremony would take place. From my position, I also noticed several unobtrusive men and women in dark suits taking positions around the perimeter of the property. One nodded slightly in my direction, a federal agent, no doubt. Amber looked radiant in her designer gown, oblivious to what was about to unfold. For a brief moment, I considered pulling her aside, giving her some cryptic warning that might spare her the public humiliation. But then she turned to me with a final jab. "Try not to look so miserable in the photos, Jessica. I know you're jealous that I'm getting married here first, but you really should be grateful. I'm even letting you participate after how difficult you've been." Any impulse to warn her vanished. The processional music began, and one by one, the bridesmaids walked down the aisle. When my turn came, I stepped out into the sunlight, forcing a smile as I made my way past rows of guests. Many of whom, I realized with a pang, were probably investors in Marcus's scheme. I took my place at the altar and watched as Amber floated down the aisle on our father's arm, the picture of bridal perfection. Marcus waited at the end, looking handsome and confident in his tuxedo, not like a man about to be arrested for multiple counts of fraud. The ceremony began, with the officiant speaking about love, trust, and honesty, words that rang hollow given the circumstances. As Marcus and Amber exchanged their personalized vows, promising to stand by each other through anything life might bring, I noticed movement at the back of the seated guests. 3 men and 2 women in dark suits were approaching discreetly from different directions, converging on the altar area. Agent Cortez was among them, her face professionally neutral as she positioned herself to the side, waiting for precisely the right moment. The officiant had just said, "If anyone knows of any reason why these 2 should not be joined in matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace," when Agent Cortez stepped forward. "Marcus Blackwood," she announced clearly, holding up her badge, "I'm Special Agent Natalie Cortez with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering." The guests gasped collectively. Marcus froze, his confident demeanor cracking as he glanced frantically around, perhaps looking for an escape route. But the federal agents had positioned themselves strategically. There was nowhere to run. Amber's face drained of color. "What is this?" she demanded, looking from Marcus to the agents to me. "What's happening?" Agent Cortez continued professionally. "Please place your hands behind your back, Mr. Blackwood." As another agent approached with handcuffs, Marcus suddenly pointed at me. "She did this," he shouted. "Jessica Wilson. She's been trying to sabotage our wedding from the start." All eyes turned to me. I maintained a carefully neutral expression, neither confirming nor denying his accusation. Amber's shock was transforming into rage as the reality of the situation dawned on her. "Jessica," she hissed, "what have you done?" Before I could respond, Agent Cortez interjected. "This arrest is the result of a months-long federal investigation into Mr. Blackwood's fraudulent investment schemes. Now, sir, please cooperate or we will add resisting arrest to your charges." As Marcus was handcuffed and led away, chaos erupted among the guests. Some were rushing forward with questions, likely investors concerned about their money, while others were hurriedly leaving, perhaps not wanting to be associated with the scandal. My parents pushed through the crowd to reach Amber, who had crumpled onto the altar steps, her perfect white dress pooling around her. My mother gathered her into her arms while my father turned to me, his face a mixture of confusion and accusation. "Did you know about this?" he demanded. "I had suspicions about Marcus's business practices," I answered carefully. "I reported those concerns to the proper authorities, as any responsible attorney would." "On your sister's wedding day?" my mother cried, looking up from Amber with tears streaming down her face. "How could you be so cruel?" "I didn't choose the timing," I said, which was technically true. "The FBI conducted their own investigation and made their own decisions about when to act." Amber's head snapped up, her mascara running down her cheeks. "You knew this would happen today. You stood there as my maid of honor, knowing they were coming to arrest Marcus." I met her gaze steadily. "Just like you stood there knowing you had stolen my venue and my deposit." "That was different," she shrieked. "That was just a stupid venue. And this is just a stupid wedding," I countered coldly. "At least, that's how you would see it if it had happened to me instead of you." My father stepped between us. "That's enough, Jessica. Can't you see your sister is devastated? Whatever Marcus did has nothing to do with her." I wasn't so sure about that, but I kept that thought to myself. Ryan appeared at my side, taking my hand supportively as Agent Cortez approached our family group. "Ms. Wilson," she addressed Amber, her tone professional but not unkind. "I need to ask you some questions about your knowledge of Mr. Blackwood's business activities. We can do this here or at our office, but it needs to happen now." Amber looked at her in disbelief. You want to question me? I'm the victim here. My wedding has been ruined. Agent Cortez's expression didn't change. Nam, we have evidence suggesting you were aware of and potentially involved in soliciting investments for Mr. Blackwood's fraudulent schemes. I'm giving you the courtesy of a private conversation before deciding if formal charges are warranted. The color drained from Amber's face again, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. My parents looked shell-shocked. Amber wouldn't be involved in anything illegal, my mother insisted. There must be some mistake. Agent Cortez simply repeated, We need to speak with your daughter now. As Amber was led away for questioning, my parents turned on me with fury and disappointment. How could you let this happen? My mother demanded. Your own sister. I didn't make Amber associate with a criminal, I said firmly. And I certainly didn't make her steal my wedding venue or try to sabotage my relationship with Ryan. Whatever is happening now is the consequence of her own choices. My father shook his head. You've always been jealous of your sister. I never thought you'd go this far to hurt her. Their words stung, but I wasn't surprised. In their eyes, Amber could do no wrong, and I would always be the villain in her story. As they walked away to find Amber, Ryan squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, he reassured me. Marcus was defrauding people, including your parents. This would have happened eventually, with or without your tip. I nodded, but the weight of the day's events was finally hitting me. I had wanted justice, but watching my sister's perfect day implode so spectacularly left me with complicated feelings. Not regret, exactly, but a certain heaviness I hadn't anticipated. As the guests dispersed and the wedding vendors began dismantling what should have been a celebration, I stood in the gardens of Hawthorne Estate, the venue that had started this whole chain of events, and wondered what would happen next. The days following Amber's disastrous wedding were chaotic. Marcus remained in federal custody, denied bail due to being considered a flight risk. The FBI investigation revealed his fraud was even more extensive than initially thought. Nearly $50 million from over 100 investors, including my parents, who had committed $200,000 of their retirement savings. Amber was released after questioning without immediate charges, though Agent Cortez informed me that the investigation into her potential involvement was ongoing. She moved back into our parents' home. Her dream of the luxury penthouse shattered when the FBI froze all of Marcus's assets. The media coverage was immediate and brutal. Boston socialite's wedding crashed by FBI read one headline. Financial fraudster arrested at altar, proclaimed another. Some articles mentioned the venue dispute between sisters, painting Amber as both victim and villain in a tangled family drama. I kept my distance from my family during this time, unable to face the continued accusations and blame. My parents had left several voicemails, each more accusatory than the last, suggesting I had orchestrated the timing of Marcus's arrest specifically to humiliate Amber. They seemed incapable of acknowledging that their beloved daughter had stolen my venue, attempted to sabotage my relationship, and possibly participated in fraud. 2 weeks after the wedding debacle, Ryan and I were having dinner at home when my phone rang with a call from Agent Cortez. I thought you should know, she said after brief pleasantries. We've uncovered emails between your sister and Marcus that clearly demonstrate she was aware of the fraudulent nature of his business. My heart sank despite everything. What kind of emails? Discussions about which potential investors to target, strategies for using her family connections, and explicit acknowledgement that the returns they were promising couldn't be legitimately achieved. Agent Cortez paused before adding, There's also evidence she was actively involved in recruiting several of your parents' friends into the scheme. I closed my eyes, absorbing this confirmation of my worst suspicions. Will she be charged? The U.S. Attorney is reviewing the evidence now. I wanted to give you a heads up because there are also several messages specifically discussing the venue situation. What do they say? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Your sister wrote to Marcus that taking your venue was, quote, killing 2 birds with 1 stone, getting the perfect wedding location while teaching Jessica that I always win, end quote. She also mentioned that the $25,000 deposit would come from funds that were supposed to be returned to early investors. The calculated cruelty of it hit me hard. Amber hadn't just taken my venue on impulse. She had deliberately set out to hurt me while using fraudulently obtained money to do it. After ending the call with Agent Cortez, I shared the information with Ryan. "I'm not surprised," he said gently. "From everything you've told me about your relationship with Amber, she's always been calculating when it comes to taking what's yours." The next day, I received an unexpected call from my grandmother Ruth, my father's mother, who lived in a retirement community in Florida. We'd always been close, though I hadn't spoken to her since before Amber's wedding. "Jessica," she said when I answered, her voice warm but serious, "I've been hearing troubling things from your parents. I think it's time you and I had a conversation about your family." She suggested meeting at a small cafe near her apartment, as she happened to be visiting Boston for a medical consultation. The following afternoon, I found her waiting at a corner table, looking elegant as always in her simple blue dress and pearl earrings. "Thank you for coming," she said, embracing me tightly before we sat down. "I want you to know that I don't share your parents' view of recent events." Relief washed over me. "You don't think I deliberately set out to ruin Amber's wedding?" Grandmother Ruth shook her head. "I think you did what any ethical person would do when confronted with evidence of fraud. The timing was unfortunate, but necessary." After ordering tea, she folded her hands on the table and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "There's something you should know about your parents and their relationship with Amber," she began. "Something that might help explain, though not excuse, the way they've always favored her." I leaned forward, curious despite myself. "Before Amber was born, your mother had a very difficult pregnancy," Grandmother Ruth explained. "She was advised to terminate for her own safety, but she refused. There were complications during delivery and afterward. The doctors told your parents she wouldn't be able to have more children." This was news to me, but they had me. Grandmother Ruth nodded. 3 years later, against all medical expectations, your mother became pregnant with you. But instead of seeing you as the miracle you were, I'm afraid they viewed your arrival as a threat." "A threat? To what?" "To the special bond they'd formed with Amber. They'd spent 3 years pouring all their love and attention into her, believing she would be their only child. When you came along, they worried that loving you equally would somehow diminish what they had with her." She sighed heavily. "I tried to talk sense into them, but they developed this irrational fear that Amber would feel replaced or forgotten if they didn't constantly reassure her of her special status." I sat back, stunned by this revelation. "So, every time they favored her over me, it wasn't because they loved you less," Grandmother Ruth said quickly. "It was this misguided attempt to compensate for a perceived loss of exclusivity that Amber never actually experienced. Over time, it became a habit they couldn't break, and Amber learned to exploit it." Tears welled in my eyes as I processed this information, decades of feeling second best suddenly cast in a new light. Not less painful, but at least somewhat comprehensible. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because this situation with Marcus and the wedding has brought everything to a breaking point," she replied. "Your parents are facing financial ruin because of their blind spot where Amber is concerned, and they're still trying to protect her rather than acknowledge her role in what happened." I wiped away a tear. "They're blaming me instead." "Yes, and that stops now." Grandmother Ruth's voice took on a determined edge. "I've already spoken to them about this pattern and how destructive it's been for both of their daughters. Your father didn't take it well, but I think your mother is beginning to see the truth." The next day, I decided it was time to confront my parents directly. I drove to their house, knowing Amber would likely be there, but feeling ready to face her as well. When I arrived, my mother answered the door, looking tired and older than I remembered. "Jessica," she said with obvious surprise. "We weren't expecting you." "I know. Can I come in?" She hesitated before stepping aside. In the living room, my father sat reading the newspaper while Amber was curled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. They both looked up as I entered. "What are you doing here?" Amber asked coldly. "I came to talk to all of you," I replied, remaining standing as they stared at me. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what's happened and why." My father folded his newspaper deliberately. If you've come to apologize for what you did to your sister, we're listening. I haven't come to apologize, I said firmly. I've come to clarify a few things. First, I didn't choose the timing of Marcus's arrest. The FBI did. Second, I reported my concerns about his business practices because I was worried about you losing your retirement savings, which, as it turns out, was a valid concern. You could have talked to us privately, my mother interjected. Would you have believed me over Amber? I challenged. You never have before. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken by Amber's scoff. Classic Jessica, always playing the victim, she said dismissively. You're just jealous that I was getting married first, at a better venue, to a more successful man. A man who's currently in federal custody for stealing millions of dollars, I pointed out. And let's be clear, the FBI has emails showing you knew exactly what Marcus was doing. You weren't an innocent bystander, Amber. Her face paled. They're taking things out of context. Like you took my email authorization codes out of context to steal my venue deposit? I countered. Or like you took Ryan's lunch meetings out of context to try and convince Mom I was having relationship problems. My mother looked between us, confusion evident on her face. Amber, what is she talking about? Nothing, Amber said quickly. Jessica's just trying to shift blame. I turned to face my parents directly. I spoke with Grandmother Ruth yesterday. She told me about Mom's difficult pregnancy with Amber and how you both overcompensated with her after I was born. My father stood abruptly. Ruth had no right to discuss that with you. She had every right, I insisted. I deserve to know why my parents consistently chose my sister over me, why they enabled her worst behaviors, why they're still defending her even when she's implicated in fraud. We don't know that she's implicated, my mother said weakly. The FBI has the emails, Mom, I said, softening my tone slightly. Emails where Amber specifically talks about stealing my venue to hurt me, using investor money for the deposit, and helping Marcus target your friends for a scheme. My father looked at Amber. Is this true? For a moment, Amber seemed ready to deny everything. Then, perhaps realizing the futility of further lies, her expression hardened. Marcus had a good business going until Jessica ruined everything, she said defiantly. And yes, I took her venue because I deserved it more. I've always had to compete with perfect Jessica the lawyer, Jessica the responsible one. The one time I had something better, a more impressive fiancé, a more lavish wedding, she couldn't stand it and destroyed it all. The raw honesty of her jealousy was stunning. My mother sank into a chair, looking devastated. We did this, she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. We created this competition between you. My father still seemed resistant to accept responsibility. That doesn't excuse getting involved in fraud, Amber. You were happy enough with the returns Marcus was promising, Amber shot back. You never questioned where that money was coming from either. The conversation continued for hours, painful truths emerging as decades of family dynamics were dissected. By the time I left, no neat resolution had been reached, but at least the reality of our dysfunctional family system had been acknowledged. In the car, I called Ryan to update him. How do you feel? He asked after I recounted the confrontation. I considered the question carefully. Lighter, I think. Not happy, exactly, but like something that needed to happen finally did. Are you going to maintain contact with them? I don't know yet, I admitted. I think I need some distance to figure out what kind of relationship is actually healthy for me to have with my family. A week later, Agent Cortez called again to inform me that the U.S. attorney had decided to charge Amber as a co-conspirator in Marcus's fraud scheme. She was arrested quietly at my parents' home, sparing her the public spectacle that had occurred at her wedding. The news brought me no joy, only a sense of grim inevitability. The sister who had taken so much from me throughout our lives had finally taken too much from others, and now justice was taking its course. 6 months after Amber's disastrous wedding, my life had transformed in ways I never could have anticipated. The most unexpected development came in the form of a certified letter from the Department of Justice, a check for $25,000, the exact amount of my venue deposit, returned from the assets seized in Marcus's fraud case. The accompanying letter explained that as a direct victim of funds misappropriated by the defendants, I was entitled to restitution. Ryan and I decided to use the money for our rescheduled wedding, though our vision had evolved considerably from our original plans. Instead of the grand historic mansion, we chose a serene beachfront property on Cape Cod, smaller, more intimate, and in many ways more meaningful than what we had initially envisioned. My career had taken a surprising turn as well. When the partners at my firm learned of my role in uncovering Marcus's fraud scheme, they were impressed by my investigative skills and ethical handling of a case that could have presented significant conflicts of interest. I was assigned to a new team specializing in financial fraud cases, with a promotion and salary increase that reflected my unique experience. Amber's legal troubles had progressed along a predictable path. After initially pleading not guilty, she eventually accepted a plea deal when confronted with the overwhelming evidence against her. She was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison, substantially less than Marcus's 12-year sentence, but still a shocking fall for someone who had always seemed to float above consequences. My parents faced their own reckoning. Though they managed to recover a portion of their investment through the asset seizure process, their financial situation was significantly compromised. More profound was the emotional toll as they confronted their role in enabling Amber's behavior throughout her life. After initially blaming me for everything, they gradually began to acknowledge the patterns that Grandmother Ruth had identified. 2 months before my wedding, my mother called and asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed with some trepidation, unsure what to expect. When I arrived at the cafe, she looked older and humbler than I remembered. "I've been seeing a therapist," she said after we ordered. "Your father is too, though he wouldn't want me telling you that." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our family, about how we treated you compared to Amber." She looked down at her coffee cup. "We were wrong, Jessica. So terribly wrong for so many years." Tears welled in my eyes, unexpected and overwhelming. After a lifetime of waiting for this acknowledgement, hearing it felt almost surreal. "What made you realize that?" I asked when I could trust my voice. "Partly Amber's legal troubles, seeing the evidence of her behavior laid out so clearly. Partly your grandmother's persistent conversations about our parenting. But mostly," she paused, meeting my eyes directly. "Mostly, it was watching how you've handled all of this with such integrity. You could have been vindictive, could have abandoned us completely, but you've remained dignified throughout." We talked for nearly 3 hours that day, beginning the slow, difficult process of rebuilding our relationship on more honest terms. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. The wounds were too deep for such a simple resolution, but it was a start. My father took longer to come around, his pride making it difficult for him to admit such fundamental mistakes. But a month before the wedding, he called and asked if I would be willing to let him walk me down the aisle. "I don't deserve the honor," he said gruffly, "but I'd like the chance to do one fatherly thing properly." I agreed, setting clear boundaries about his role and behavior on the day. Our relationship remained tentative, but the effort meant something. The week before my wedding, I received a letter from Amber, sent from the federal correctional facility, where she was serving her sentence. I let it sit unopened on my kitchen counter for 3 days, uncertain whether reading her words would help or harm my emotional state so close to my wedding day. When I finally opened it, I found 5 handwritten pages of what appeared to be genuine reflection. There were no explicit apologies. Amber wasn't capable of that level of accountability yet. But there was an acknowledgement of the competition she had always felt with me, and a recognition that her actions had ultimately harmed herself most of all. "I thought winning meant taking what you had," she wrote near the end. "I never built anything of my own, just tried to take shortcuts to what I thought would make me happy. Now I have nothing, and somehow you still have everything that matters." I didn't respond immediately, deciding to wait until after the wedding. Her words deserved consideration, but I needed to focus on my future rather than our painful past. My wedding day dawned clear and cool, a perfect October Saturday on the Cape. The ceremony would be held on a deck overlooking the Atlantic, with just 60 guests, true friends and family members who had supported us through everything. As I dressed in my simple but elegant gown, there was a knock at the door of my preparation room. My grandmother Ruth entered, looking radiant in a silver dress that complemented her white hair. "I have something for you," she said, opening a small velvet box to reveal a pair of sapphire earrings. "These were my mother's and her mother's before that. I always intended them for you." As she helped me put them on, she added quietly, "You know, in our family's history, there have been other difficult sisters, other periods of estrangement and reconciliation. Families are messy, Jessica. The strong ones find ways to heal without denying the truth of what happened." Her words stayed with me as I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, saw Ryan waiting for me with tears in his eyes, and spoke vows that felt all the more meaningful for the journey we had traveled to reach this moment. During the reception, I looked around at the guests celebrating with us. My parents sitting somewhat awkwardly but present, my grandmother dancing joyfully with Ryan's grandfather, colleagues who had supported my career, and friends who had stood by me through the entire ordeal with Amber and Marcus. The absence of my sister was noticeable, but not devastating. We had each chosen our paths, and now we were living with the consequences of those choices. That evening, as Ryan and I danced under strings of lights on the beach, he asked, "Are you going to respond to Amber's letter?" I considered the question carefully. Yes, but not with expectations. I think there's value in acknowledging her reflection, but I don't expect a miraculous transformation or perfect sisterhood. He nodded. That seems wise. Cautious compassion. Exactly, I agreed. I can leave the door slightly open without standing vulnerably in the doorway. 3 days after returning from our honeymoon, I wrote a brief, honest response to Amber. I didn't minimize the harm she had caused, but I acknowledged her apparent desire to understand her own motivations better. I included a photo from the wedding, not to flaunt my happiness, but to share it, a small gesture toward whatever relationship might be possible in the future. As I sealed the envelope, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. What began with the theft of a wedding venue had cascaded into revelations about my family, my sister's criminal activities, and ultimately, my own strength and values. I had lost a venue but gained clarity, lost certain illusions about my family but gained honest relationships, lost a sister in some ways but perhaps, someday, might gain a more authentic connection with her. Sometimes justice arrives in unexpected packages. Sometimes the thing you think you want, like a perfect wedding at a historic mansion, turns out to be less valuable than what you actually need: truth, integrity, and the courage to stand up for both. If you've ever experienced family betrayal or had to make difficult choices between loyalty and doing what's right, I hope my story gives you some comfort. Life rarely offers perfect resolutions, but it does provide opportunities for growth and new beginnings. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Has karma ever worked in your favor after a family betrayal? Did you find that justice sometimes comes in unexpected ways? If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of family dynamics, personal growth, and the sometimes messy path to justice. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that even after the darkest family storms, there can be beautiful new beginnings. Sometimes the life you rebuild after betrayal becomes stronger and more authentic than what you had before.